The four refineries in the country located in Port Harcourt, Warri and Kaduna have a combined installed capacity of 445,000 barrels per day. Now, it is disheartening, however, that none of them is working at the moment and that the country has to import refined petroleum products to meet local consumption.
Quite disheartening, Jumai, especially considering that an estimated 12 trillion naira was spent between 2015 and last year for turnaround maintenance of the refineries as well as fuel subsidies, and that's according to data sourced from the NNPC. Now, despite Nigeria's status as now the second largest crude oil producer, it continues to rely on Belgium and other European nations to refine its crude oil.
And we understand that out of the 3 Belgian refineries which Nigeria patronizes, 2 are owned by ExxonMobil and Total, which are international oil companies operating in Nigeria in a joint venture with the NNPC Limited. Yet, Nigeria's refineries are comatose and lying fallow, but other African countries have better stories to tell in oil and gas.
Of course, now in Africa, Morocco doesn't produce crude oil, but has a refinery with a plate capacity of 200,000 barrels per day. Now, Egypt is ranked number 5 in Africa in terms of production, but has 9 refineries with a plate number of 800,000 barrels per day capacity. Algeria, which is of course one of the leading producers of crude oil on the continent, has 5 refineries with well over 670,000 barrels per day. Now, Libya is also there. It has refineries, 5 of them, and the capacity is around about 380,000 barrels per day.
That is even in the midst of war there. And if we take a look at our West African neighbors, the combined oil-producing capacity of Niger Republic, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Liberia is less than half of Nigeria's oil-producing capacity, yet each of them has an operational refinery in their respective countries.
So, what are these countries doing differently? Industry experts have continued to attribute the rot in Nigeria's refineries to poor leadership and corruption, which have made turnaround maintenance and the subsidy regime some conduit, many would argue, for fleecing the nation's scarce financial resources. And this is owing to the fact that several deadlines have been missed for the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt, Warri and Kaduna refineries to become operational. And this is after huge funds have been spent on them.
Indeed, Kingsley, and meanwhile, the subsidy regime is expected to end next month in June, as the outgoing administration did not make budgetary provision for further payments. And this puts the incoming government in a difficult position. Industry experts, however, believe that if the refineries can come on stream, they will significantly reduce Nigeria's reliance on imported petroleum products.
No doubt about that, Jumai. Now the nation is putting so much hope on the privately owned refinery, and that's the Dangote refinery, which is soon to come on stream, and is projected to have a refining capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. There are many who also argue that the Dangote refinery will still need to buy crude from Nigeria, and of course that will be at the international price. So there will still be some uncertainty if it will be the ultimate solution to the country's refined crude oil crisis.
And don't forget that modular refineries are also on the cards. But will the incoming administration explore these initiatives, and what will be the magic wand to bring the country's refineries on stream? Now, these are issues which we shall take up with our guests on Good Morning Nigeria today. I am Jumai Yusuf.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Jumai to also welcome you to the program Good Morning Nigeria. We're live as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority from the nation's capital of Abuja. Now, in the course of the program, we will have a business review and newspaper, of course, review as well. In the meantime, we join our colleague Nolin Ebelame, who has the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Nolin.
Good morning, Kingsley and Jumai. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. The federal government says it has completed evacuation of Nigerian students stranded in Sudan. More than 2,000 Nigerians were airlifted back home in 15 flights batches. It says it will continue to combat cybercrimes and other related offences through appropriate legislations. The Solicitor General of the Federation and Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Justice, Beatrice J.D. Agba, affirmed this at the end of a week-long training the trainers on cybercrime and electronic evidence for judges and prosecutors.
Convinced that building effective repository of knowledge and expertise in electronic evidence on cybercrime prosecution will certainly ensure skilled prosecution and effective judicial proceedings. I therefore commend the global action on cybercrime extended of the Council of Europe, the West African response on cybercrime and fight against cybercrime, and the Federal Ministry of Justice of the Federation for this initiative.
The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, has made several arrests and seizures across Nigeria. 2 businessmen were arrested at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja for allegedly ingesting cocaine pellets. They excreted 193 pellets of the illicit drug after 3 days in custody. The agency also raided drug joints in Kano and Abuja, arresting 185 suspects with different quantities of illicit substances. Meanwhile, NDLEA says it has intercepted parcels of cocaine from Saudi Arabia and Canada, seized tramadol pills, other opiates, and apprehended several drug dealers across Nigeria. NNPC Limited, in collaboration with its partners Tantita Security Services, have busted a company fraudulently involved in crude oil theft. A barge with 700 barrels of illegally loaded crude was set ablaze to show crude oil thieves that it cannot be business as usual.
A sewage truck was coming into this place and going out. As at that particular point in time, we did think, or our thoughts then, was that it was actually coming here to process sewage. It did about 2 trips. It was on the 3rd trip. We didn't think that there was going to be that much sewage in this place for a truck to be coming in and going out, and we had to apprehend the truck. So upon getting the truck and inspecting it, we discovered it was carrying crude oil.
Nice is described as a substitute word for a person strong enough to tolerate everything and soft enough to understand everyone. During the last 1 week, the world turned attention to this special breed of professionals with the 2023 campaign theme, Our Nurses, Our Future. Mothers come with a lot of packages: care, comfort, patience, love, sacrifice, and the list is endless. Across the world, the role and importance of mothers in the society resonated in churches that observed the International Mother's Day.
Fathers, the home, have to appreciate the sacrifices of women.
Everybody is an offspring of a woman. You can't come into the world except through a woman. So it's such a special occasion. We celebrate our mothers, our wives, our sisters.
Mother is supreme. Mother is gold to me. I feel each time I remember my mom, I also remember every other woman around the world.
And that concludes the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kinsley and Jumai after the break. I am Nolene Ebel Ame.
As I stand before you, I don't have a diplomatic passport. Not because I don't want it, not because I cannot have it, but because I don't want to get indulged. Pure and simple. I want to be a citizen of a country, and that citizenship is the simplicity of living within the realm of your epoch. Please, let's build Nigeria together.
From north to south, from east to west, we share one blood in our veins. The blood of Nigeria, Nigeria's blood, proud and strong. We stand together, we belong together, we cherish our diversity, we celebrate our unity, we honor our history, we shape our destiny. We are Nigerians, Nigerian mothers, fathers, sons and daughters, brave and free. We love our country, we live by our fierce, unique bond. This is our blood.
Nigeria, better together. This message is powered by the Presidential Transition Council, PTC.
The 14th Ordinary Session of the General Assembly of the African Union of Broadcasting will convene from May 16 to May 20, 2023 in Abuja, Nigeria. Over 200 participants comprising professionals and stakeholders from the audiovisual industry will converge to deliberate on the theme, Impacts and Challenges of African Broadcasting in the Digital Transformation of the World. The session will also dedicate its attention to the following pressing topics: the acquisition and exploitation of broadcasting rights for major sporting events, the African Continental Free Trade Area (AfCFTA) as a driver of sustainable development, the African Health Agenda with a focus on the challenge posed by the spread of cancer on the continent, and the inaugural edition of AUB Show, an initiative geared towards promoting African culture, particularly its young talents. The 14th Ordinary Session of the General Assembly of the AUB is a 4-day event designed to galvanize and give impetus to African television broadcasting.
Good morning. My life is a whole lot easier now, even when I'm working from home. I still get everything done. Workout track. And faster too. Guys, I'll make my decision and get back to you. I take my meetings uninterrupted. Video call Catherine. Calling Catherine. Checking with Bay. No cracks. Go, go, go! Behind you, behind you! And when it's time to bond with my friends across the globe, I connect seamlessly, all thanks to my Airtel router. Delivery is here. Thank you. Be like me. Stay connected always with the Airtel home broadband. Who are you talking to? It's nothing. You're talking to me? No.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
My name is Gifty Robremaj. I am in Basic 2. I am from Uba Community Primary School 2. The people from Ubek, representative from the Abia State Government, headmistress and teachers from Uba Community Primary School 2. My fellow pupils, ladies and gentlemen, good day. We welcome you to this unique occasion. We thank our President Muhammadu Buhari for the school feeding program. Some of us do not eat while coming to school, but this school feeding has helped us a lot. May God bless our presidents and governors in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's not relent in our nation-building efforts. After the elections, we have a nation to build. Elections have come and gone. Let relationships and friendships continue. Nigeria, better together.
This message is powered by the Presidential Transition Council, PTC.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Next is business news with Tope Alabi.
The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, said the banking sector was committed to expanding foreign exchange supply in the country, noting that the RT200 program has made significant progress in export proceeds repatriation since its establishment in February 2022. For exporters flying the flag of Nigeria in the international market, the Bankers Committee and the CBN expressed readiness to partner with them on achieving their goals. The third edition of the biannual RT200 Non-Oil Export Summit with the theme RT200 Challenges and Prospects to Success in Lagos reviewed the progress made so far from inception of the program in the first half of 2022 to date for greater results going forward. Nigeria's RT200 FX program is a repatriation rebate scheme aimed at improving the inflow of stable and sustainable foreign exchange into the market with a view to raising $200 billion in foreign exchange earnings over the next 5 years from non-oil proceeds. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, has expressed concerns over the newly introduced Fiscal Policy Measures FPM and Tariff Amendment for 2023, scheduled to take effect from the first day of June 2023. This, according to the President, Adewale Smart Oyerinde, is as a result of alleged dwindling foreign direct investment to Nigeria, which he said recorded only $1.06 billion in capital importation in the fourth quarter of 2022, bringing the total capital importation for the 2022 fiscal year to $5.33 billion.
You know, in a situation where an employer pays over 60 different kind of taxes, levies, and fees annually. So it's all those, bring them together, they strangulate businesses. And once businesses are challenged, are not thinking of competitiveness but survival, then it affects a lot of things. It's more like cause and effect.
Adewale Smart called on the federal government to suspend the implementation of the newly introduced fiscal policy measure and maintain status quo of no excise increase other than as prescribed in the 2022 fiscal policy measures approved by the President earlier in 2022. With business news, I am Tope Alabi.
Many thanks for the business news package on Good Morning Nigeria. A review of the papers we have this morning follows next.
Our newspaper reviewer Chukudi Okole Ubaja is in the studio. Good morning, Chukudi.
Good morning, Juma. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Good to see you again.
Let's see. I hope you had a good weekend.
Yes, I did. I slept some. I did. Yes. The cold is still there, but it's getting out gradually. Kingsley, I see you joined the league.
Well, you know,
I hope you don't add me to it again.
We're in the rainy season, and the Federal Capital Territory has been experiencing some thunderstorms and had some flashes of lightning. Yesterday again was no exception. And the temperatures are good. They're good, but of course the consequences is what you get. The cold. Yes. As much as you try taking warm fluids, when your sleep gets interrupted, particularly early in the morning, which is the best time to sleep, and you have to be rushing to the studios, your immune system will have to, of course, compensate. Compensate for that. So that's what we keep doing. But of course, we always enjoy being on Good Morning Nigeria because there are millions of viewers out there, not just in the country, but elsewhere around the world. And because of the large population of Nigerians outside of our shows, there are many Nigerians who get to tune in, they join us online, and others, of course, access it via YouTube. And the many segments of our paper continue to be of tremendous attraction to them. So we applaud them, we appreciate them, and we also value the feedback that they give to us by way of comments, and more particularly the fact of the sobriety of Good Morning Nigeria and they focus on issues rather than mere tantrums and endless vilification of ourselves and our country.
Thank you, Kingsley.
Well, on that note, let's quickly go through the papers we have in the studio this morning. I'll begin with the Leadership newspaper. And above the masthead, we have Senate queries 10.4 billion judgment debt disbursement. Senate queries 10.4 billion naira judgment debt disbursement. You find the details on page 6. Discourse, NAC approves disconnection of electricity debtors after 12 days. You find details on page 28. Just below the masthead of the Leadership newspaper, 14 days to go, Tinubu will rescue Nigeria with proper planning. That's coming from elder statesman BC Akonde. Find it on page 7. MTN Nigeria, Dangote Cement, top most profitable companies on NGX. You find the details on page 25. Man kills mother over failure to give him 10,000 naira. Find details on page 23. $800 million loan. Sarah plans legal action against World Bank. Find details on page 7. And the picture story you see there, Nigerian young girl set to break world cooking record. And the pictures of 27-year-old Nigerian chef Hilda Bati, who is on the verge of breaking the Guinness World Record for longest cooking time by an individual in action. You find details on page 6. And the headlines in the Leadership newspaper, National Assembly Leadership. Anxiety heightens as APC governors meet today. Anxiety heightens as APC governors meet today. With kickers, aggrieved aspirants reject Deputy Speaker offer. Don't bow to pressure, stakeholders counsel Tinubu. We will not allow repeat of 2015 drama, National Vice Chairman, and PDP shops for surprise nominee. That's about what we have in the Leadership newspaper this morning, please, sir.
Okay, we also have the Punch newspaper above the name flag, the following headlines. 86 senators will support me, says Akpabio. Operators demand tough sanctions as Nigeria loses 313 billion naira to oil thieves. Why I rejected requests to visit Tinubu, that's according to Bode George. The news story has a double-decker headline and one rider. States paying governors jumbo pensions owe 3 trillion naira debt. States paying governors jumbo pensions owe 3 trillion naira debt. TUC wants governors to pay workers' arrears and experts flay jumbo packages. Speaker, that's the kicker, Abbas Betara split opposition camp. Nigeria imports 2.7 trillion naira sugar as government master plan stalls. Buhari's failure to rescue Ilea Sharibu disappointing. Prisoners feeding. States fault federal government, seek new revenue formula. Death shakes Nollywood as 3 actors and technician die in 1 week. Sheun Kuti, that's the kicker, musician may report to police today, appoints Falana. That's on page 16. Chukudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. This is an investigation, so attribution does not arise at all. The Punch is saying that states paying outgoing governors jumbo pensions owe 3 trillion naira rather. Now this investigation has it that at least 18 governors will retire into real opulence, a luxury, a life of luxury when they leave office on May 29, 2023. They have arranged or are retiring into jumbo pays invariably approved by the affected states' legislatures, many of which are at the beck and call of the governors anyway. Now, when a governor serves a state for 4 years, and maybe even 8 years, if he got lucky a second time at the polls, for crying out loud, some perks of office should follow them back into their private lives. Nobody's disputing that. What people are perhaps peeved about is that funds and complementary packages going out of office, so to speak, with the governors, you know, do not quite share the same territory with good reasoning, particularly when you consider that a lot of scholar, is lying out there on the landscape of the states they govern. So you can't quite, marry the two situations. But then, this is a situation we have to contend with. The question is, if the governors don't receive those or these jumbo packages, will they necessarily go into poverty? Is it that they have no business to go back to? Because this is something I mentioned the other time. We should stop voting in people who have no business to return to.
Politics is the business.
Oh dear. Politics is not supposed to be a business.
Yes, but
politics is supposed to be service to my people. You're actually taking a break from making money to serve humanity. Then you return to prove to the world that it's not as if I was indigent. The way we are interpreting it is a big, big problem. What famine are these governors storing up resources to fight? You want to ask. I think that what causes it all is the rub my back, I rub your back relationship between the governors and the state legislators. Well, they have they've always had financial autonomy. Forget the act and the bill and the act that eventually empowers them. They've always had it. How do I mean? When the state executive presents their budget, these people have a way of saying, well, we're not saying we won't approve this, but you also must permit this from our side and all that. So it becomes a question of, subtle blackmail, maybe understandable blackmail between the two of them. But anyway, what the Punch is saying is you can't take too much money out of the system over a period. It's going to be till they die, when there is so much money owed creditors. And I think it makes sense. We need to look into that. Quickly, why I rejected request to visit Tinubu, that's PDP bigwig, Bode George. He actually says that some APC people visited him, trying to mend fences. He said at a point that if the president-elect, he was not president-elect then, if Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu becomes president, he might have to check out and all that. I think they are actually trying to get him not to check out. But Bode George is a man I treasure a lot. You see, Juma, while they are all looking for politicians, I'm looking for statesmen. When what was it now? There was this it's not a gang up. It was a protest by mainly APC people when the president, before President Muhammadu Buhari, that's Goodluck Jonathan, was there, occupying Nigeria. So when there was a little brouhaha, David Mark, Senate President then, was out of the country. When he got to the airport and they said Nigeria is getting to a standstill, it was over removal of oil subsidy. He said everything will quieten down in 24 hours. Within 18 hours, there was peace. Jumai, I have my way of looking for statesmen. I haven't come here to promote David Mark, but I watch people. Those are the people I want to listen to. That's the point.
I'm looking at this story. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and then somebody suddenly killed his mother over 20,000 naira. This is 10,000. She was supposed to give him 20, and she gave him 10 because he requested for 20. And when she went to the bank, she came and gave him 10, and he ended up killing her. They say he's mentally.
I wanted to ask you if there's a history of madness in his family,
for the past 30
or
years.
whether he's a solo madman.
But we've had so many stories across the country of recent of children, killing their parents all over the country, and it's a trend that I think needs to be looked into. Psychiatric care is very, very important. Most people don't want to go to these psychiatric hospitals because people say they are mad, but you don't need to be mad to see a psychiatrist. Do you?
I have a direct experience with my wife. I'm a bit bold to say it because when certain things happen to you, you get informed and find out how ignorant society has always been.
Yes.
Look, mental health issues abound in the country.
Yes.
Almost every nook and cranny you look. But nobody wants to be identified as a mad person.
No.
In the case of my wife, she had a stroke and lost speech. It's a mental health issue.
It is.
Many people are having depression that is almost leading them to suicide. We're only looking to cure malaria and typhoid.
Yeah, unfortunately, Chukudi, I know that a number of families are suffering in silence and seeking to conceal, mental health issues. A few years ago, in Asaba, there was a terrible incident that happened. A family conducted a memorial service of the passing of the husband, that is, the father of the family, 3 children, and upon their return to the house, one of the 3 children took a knife and stabbed the other 2 siblings to death right in the presence of their mom.
But why?
That's it.
And unfortunately, the mom is just passed away some months ago. Terrible. Heartbreaking. What needs to be done? Because we have taken on mental health issues on Good Morning Nigeria. We discussed suicide on a number of occasions. I mean, our guests, who are of course very regular on the program, Jibril, a brilliant psychiatrist from Ibadan. We have to get over the stigma.
Yes.
Get over the stigma.
There should be no stigma.
People do, in advanced countries, they do self-check-in into a facility for them. Because you can't live in an environment such as ours and not have traces of mental health issues, as we said, whether it's depression or otherwise. So it's almost
melancholy.
And then, of course, we have a social support system, but that doesn't suffice.
It doesn't.
There are persons who are just walking around the street and they are vacant.
And because of the stigma,
or furiously having conversation with themselves.
Yes, and with the like Kingsley said, the stigma prevents them from seeking help.
There should be no stigma.
In Nigeria, you can't even talk to your sibling about issues you have before you say that mad person. The moment you have a problem, she's mad. She's crazy.
That's what we have to. And it doesn't.
Even within the family system,
it doesn't result. It doesn't result in all cases from substance abuse.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, you're completely right.
Before we go, we must touch on this issue because it's a very significant public interest matter.
Okay.
Shehu Kuti, the son of Fela Anikulapo Kuti, was shown in a video that went viral at the weekend assaulting a policeman in Lagos. He not only slapped him, he also threatened him, wagging a finger at the police officer.
And calling me,
say, whether are you the crazy,
are you mad?
Whatever the provocation.
I was wrong.
Whatever the provocation. Happily, the Inspector General of Police has called for his arrest and prosecution. The Police Service Commission, the chairman, has also called for diligent prosecution of that case. Look, it is not a question of saying citizens should take the laws into their hands. That police officer should be commended for his equanimity under such intense provocation by a citizen. Assuming the police officer obviously his hands were free, so he was bearing no arms. If the police officer had retaliated and the thing went out by this morning, you will be sure that many people would have written millions, if not trillions of words, like father, like son. What the police did to Fela, that is what they are doing to his son now, X, Y, Z. They should take this matter and prosecute it. And I'm saying this advisedly. We have also seen videos of police officers assaulting citizens. Those videos were escalated to the police authorities, and those police officers were disciplined by the police authorities upon proper investigation. Some demoted and others dismissed from the force. We have seen the video. So if it can happen to a serving police officer who is assaulting the private citizen, you as a private citizen, you have no right whatsoever to assault an officer in uniform. Never.
Kingsley, as far as I'm concerned, policemen will remain heroes to me. I'm not trying to denigrate us, but the truth is that a society gets the kind of police force it deserves. We should not blackmail the police by hiding the fact that many of us are worse than the police. I'm not excusing any excesses by the police. But a man who wears a uniform, if he's not respected, you're not going to be my friend forever.
Imagine if that happened in America.
No, I mean, that's not how it will go. And then one other video, well, we're leaving now, please. I don't know whether you have seen this. It's very disgusting, and I hope the police authorities have also seen the video. It went around sometime last week. There were some a set of, please pardon this, irresponsible young persons who were spraying money on a goat. A goat.
I didn't see that. Well, on that note, you're watching Good Morning
He said irresponsible. It could be a ritual.
Yes, our first conversation. Our first conversation this morning borders on fixing the nation's moribund refineries after May 29th. And to set the tone for our conversation, let's now join. Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, I'm just so excited. You know, goat, actually, I sort of lost track. We'll take a break. When we return, our conversation will begin. Just stay. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Our first conversation this morning borders on fixing the nation's moribund refineries after May 29th. And to set the tone for our discussion, let's see this background report by our correspondent Abdusalam Jibril.
In late 1965, Nigeria's first oil refinery at Eleme near Port Harcourt began operations with a capacity of 38,000 barrels per day, enough to meet domestic requirements at the time. Due to the demand to satisfy a rapidly growing economy, another refinery was constructed and began operations in Warri in 1978 with a capacity of 100,000 barrels per day. In October 1980, a third refinery with a capacity of 100,000 barrels per day began operations in Kaduna, while a fourth refinery was completed 9 years later at Eleme, increasing Nigeria's refining capacity to 445,000 barrels per day. While available data from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries OPEC say Nigeria is Africa's biggest oil producer, some experts note that the nation's moribund refineries have left the oil and gas industry in crisis, forcing the country to import fuel to meet its local needs. They maintain that the 4 refineries over the years have become dilapidated and idle due to mismanagement, and not even series of turnaround maintenance have turned any one of them around. Some other analysts have stressed that while it is important to ensure that Nigeria refines its crude oil locally to ensure availability of petroleum products at reasonable prices, they call for measures to address the huge resources spent on turnaround maintenance without good results. Some independent investigations reveal that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) spent close to 2 trillion naira on maintaining refineries from 2015 till 2021. They insist that over the years, the refineries have guzzled billions of naira in the name of upkeep, and yet could not produce any barrel of refined oil for domestic consumption. Fuel subsidies have also become contentious in recent years. In February this year, the NNPC says that the country is spending over 400 billion naira monthly on petroleum subsidy. Some industry stakeholders stress that these funds spent on petroleum subsidy are no longer sustainable, and that the subsidy regime has become conduit for corruption, as well as leading to the smuggling of cheaper gasoline from neighboring countries. With Dangote refinery about to come on stream, is it the solution to the country's oil and gas challenges? Modular refineries have also been identified as a possible solution to boosting the country's refining capacity. Will the incoming administration explore these initiatives? Guests on the program will be speaking to these issues and more shortly.
Thank you very much, Abdusalam Jibril, for that background. With us To discuss these issues, we have two regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria. And of course, the focus today is on the refineries, and they are also energy experts. Let me welcome Engineer Yabagi Yusuf Sani, regular Good Morning Nigeria. Many know him as a politician, but of course, he's an energy expert to the core. We're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you, Kinsley.
All right. And also the other leg of energy, that's away from electricity. We have Odion Omofoma, who is the CEO of New Hampshire Group. Odion, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
And also joining us via Zoom from Warri, Delta State, is Captain Warade Enisho. He's the Executive Director, Operations, Tantita Security Services Nigeria Limited. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Okay, yeah, we do hope that when it lays by, you'll be able to participate in the conversation. I don't know how we're going to start this conversation and where it's going to lead us, because the background is clear. We discussed this, that we are not one of the known oil producing countries in the world. We are amongst the leading oil producing countries, not just on the continent, but elsewhere in the world. But the lingering national embarrassment is there. And perhaps this just reminds me of a saying in our place, that what causes a child to laugh will also make that child to weep. A couple of decades ago, people were celebrating the fact that the turnaround maintenance of refineries had become a conduit for lining pockets. The economy, of course, was much more constrained. We had not had the revolutions in ICT, for instance. So sources of income or revenue for those who were targeting the public purse were fairly limited. So turnaround maintenance was a sluice gate. People, those who were engaged in it, they were all laughing. And today, we are seeing the consequence. So, and then you keep hearing, they will fix this, they will fix that. They will fix this, they will fix that. Nothing ever gets done. Elsewhere, from where we import our refined petroleum products, those refineries have been in operation for several decades. I've seen some refineries in the U.S., and when you see the ages of some of those refineries, and you say to yourself, how are they able to run this? But it looks like we will collapse what we have and then say, no, let's go abroad, let's go abroad. And just take it from wherever you want to take it and tell us what we need to do.
Thank you, Kingsley. Well, we have to take it from the history of oil and gas in Nigeria and what has happened in particular with the refined products, that is the refineries. You have the upstream, midstream, downstream in the sector. You look at how did we come to have the refineries? If you look at from the 70s, when the pipelines, the depots, most of the refineries were built. Like you rightly said, like the saying goes, like the teeth that the lion used to play with the cubs, it's the same teeth that it used to bite and then harm other animals or something like that. So that's what has happened, actually, like you put it, in the oil and gas sector. And the history I'm talking about is, why is it that with all the systems, the machinery, the instrument, the gamut of what you call the oil and gas industry, like I said, from the upstream, where you produce it, to the midstream, where you refine it and distribute it to the downstream, which is the depots, why is it that we are not getting it right? I think the answer is not far-fetched. I'm sorry to use a current example, what is happening, which is with our elections. It wasn't that we didn't have the instruments, the technology, and everything that other countries have, and they have made very good, conduct very good elections. But Nigerians, it is just because we have Nigerians involved. That's the only missing link with us taking advantage of those machinery and what they're supposed to produce. Coming to the oil and gas sector, the country is one of, if not number 6, I think number 7, largest producer of crude oil and gas in the world. We're in the OPEC. We play big in the OPEC. In fact, most of our ministers or personnel have become heads of OPEC, from Rwanda to Barakindo to, the way they are there now. So we are not small fish, fry in the something. So then the question you ask again is, don't we, the systems I mentioned, like you have what is called SCADA systems, supervisory control and data acquisition systems, which means as large and huge as the facilities are, you can sit in the comfort of your office or even mobile and be able to control and respond to all these systems, be able to know that. Don't say because it's big. No, the industry has developed such that it doesn't matter how large it is. You can still control and ensure that you get the right output from the facilities. Then you have SAP, which is the systems and other system applications and products used to now plan, the enterprise resources planning, softwares, which we have. NMPC has all of these things I'm talking about. It's not that they don't have them. I was involved in one of them, so I know for a fact that we have everything that the countries you mentioned. How are they getting it right? We have those things here. We spend billions of naira in them. For instance, like I tell you, look at the history. When the pipelines and depots, refineries were constructed, there was something called telemetry. It's part of the SCADA system. It's supposed to enable NMPC in Abuja here to monitor what enters the facilities and what goes out of it. Meaning that the product accounting, which is at the bottom, because if you cannot really account for your finances, your inventory, how do you run that system? You cannot. But you know what? They allow these depots to be constructed, but the telemetry system was never even installed. I know for a fact that the cartons that brought those things are there, and if those things were to be installed, you will now be able to reduce the stealing that we are talking about, the wanton stealing that has now become the order of the day in the industry. From the beginning, the people that sold these systems to us are aware that you needed something to be able to control a far, located facility, so that you can be able to know how much am I making, how much product has entered into my system, how much has gone out of it. All these things, we have them. And I know, even after that telemetry was not installed, other systems were brought into the system because I was responsible for one of them. Because I worked for NITI, NITI gave me a job to carry out a study to determine how effective and reliable information coming from the industry are for financial planning, for national planning and things like that. And we conducted this study for almost 1 year. We came up with a result which was known before, even because we know that the metering systems were substandard. In some places you don't even have meters, and where you have them, they are not used in the manner as it's being used in other climes. So these studies are available to even NITI and the government. But again, government took a decision after our study. They made it necessary for NMPC to now acquire those systems that will enable them, as they are sitting in Abuja here, they will know what is happening in Port Harcourt, in Kaduna, in Lagos, all the 17 depots they have in this country. They can control them. But guess what? It's never used. 3 times these systems were installed. So if you don't have a system of knowing how much is being stolen or how much is coming to your system, how much is going out, how do you really expect to be able to manage, and be able to sustain in a sustainable manner, the environment? Another thing is this: we allocated 445,000 barrels of crude oil as installed capacity for domestic, consumption. Was the best of intentions, so that domestically we will have this crude oil, that we can use. But what happened? They killed those refineries. Turnaround maintenance you are talking about is turnaround thieving. Turnaround theft. It's not turnaround maintenance, because we all know what was happening in those turnarounds. Even the GMD, the GEC or NMPC today, Mele Kyari, he said it. For 20 years, he said turnaround maintenance is a conduit for stealing. That it has never worked. Poor management. It was a clear case of stealing. So there is an industry capture, in Nigeria, as far as the oil and gas sector is concerned. And we all know what is happening. Look at the Dangote refinery that everyone is celebrating. Yes, I know Dangote refinery is coming 650 or something like that barrels per day. kudos to Dangote and to the business community. But the issue is this: shouldn't NNPC be ashamed of themselves that you can't run 445,000 barrels, as facility? A private sector has come up and doubled what you are even supposed to produce, and you are now celebrating without shame. That Dangote is coming. Every time you talk to them, saying we have 20% in Dangote. To hell with that 20%. They should be in prison. Some of them, they are prison materials. Believe you me, and we know it. So the point I'm making is that I salute the courage of Dangote, and I also encourage other businessmen to come on stream to do similar thing, because oil for sometimes will still be an important factor in the energy supply to the economies, not only Nigerian economy but even the industrial world that we're talking about. So the issue, Kingsley, that we're having with the refineries, that's just it's the, perhaps you can say, the symptom of what is happening. But the real issues is corruption. Corruption is the real issues, and I don't know why, if GMD knows that for 20 years that there has been mismanagement and billions of dollars have been spent, were they given to spirits? Are they not human beings? Some of them are still living in this country. Why can't they call them to come and answer questions? Because they know they have established that what they did was wrong. I'm talking about NNPCs themselves coming out with this study. So why did they leave them to be like? So our refineries will not work, even with the $1.5 billion that we are spending on Port Harcourt to refine, to do another turnaround, thieving, stealing of our resources, because that's what it is. And I tell you why I say what it is. If you go to those refineries as I speak today, they can challenge me. You don't have working meters in those refineries. And I bet you, by the time they finish those refineries, you won't have a working meters. All these trucks that are going to depots to carry, our fuel, they use dipstick, manual. So it's between the man taking your product, the national product, and the staff. How much do you pay him? That you think he will be honest with the country. So because I have gone to all those depots when I was working for Naiti. I went to the terminals. I slept on Bonga, Shell, for 7 days to understand what is happening. Do you know what is happening, Kingsley? Those facilities who are exporting crude oil out of this country, the staff of DP are supposed to, they were sleeping on that facilities, but 7 o'clock a.m. they are supposed to be there to supervise the vessels that will depart, but they don't. 9 o'clock, the guys are still sleeping in their bedrooms. So after the ships have sailed, gone, it is then that the man will come out and give you paper to sign, and he will sign. I challenge them to tell me it's not true, because I slept there and I saw it.
That's what I call a firing point for you this morning. It's quite sad. It's disheartening what is happening in Nigeria. And Mr. Odion, we are celebrating the private sector, that is Dangote Refinery. I'm sure everybody knows that our refineries are old because we've not been having turnaround maintenance. Generations, like from 30 years old, don't even know that we had a functional, refinery back then. And if we can celebrate Dangote, why are we not keen into private sector participation in our refineries in Nigeria?
I think, first of all, let's congratulate Dangote for taking that immense step. And if you trace Dangote's roots, in 2006, his consortium, Blue Star Consortium, had partnered with Mr. Otedola and Transcorp, then owned by, Transcorp Group, to bid for Port Harcourt and Kaduna refineries. And the consortium won the bid, only for the bid to be reversed in 2007 when the then late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua came in, and NNPC, the GMD of NNPC then, who interestingly was also called Yar'Adua, convinced the president with the help of the labor unions that NNPC could fix the refineries, and so there was no need selling the refineries. I remember Blue Star had made serious down payments for the refinery, and I think government had to refund their money. So from that process going forward, I think Dangote then had that vision. He was going to build one, and it's taken 6 years. Hopefully the refinery will be commissioned sometime this month. Commissioning and operations, two different things. So hopefully end of this year, next year, it might start full operations. But it's an immense project. But he's not the only one that has built a refinery that is working as we speak. In Edo State, we've got 2 refineries that are operational. They're called modular refineries. And it's one of the initiatives of the Ministry of Petroleum to say, okay, let's bring more people into the refinery business. So they had they had a process, or rather a regulation, where they sort of developed a framework for people or investors to invest in modular refineries. And as we speak, there's the ND Western modular refinery. That's 11,000 barrel refinery producing mainly diesel. That's in Rivers State. There's the Walter Smith refinery in Imo State. That's a 5,000 barrel refinery. There's the Edo refinery. That's about I think that's about 6,000 as well. And then there's a DuPont midstream refinery. DuPont is 11,000. Modular refineries by regulations can't exceed 30,000 barrels. So you've got these refineries that are scattered around, but they really can't do much. The other thing is that these refineries are not very sophisticated. So the best they can do is produce diesel and the other heavy products from petroleum. Yes, you can put in certain components that will give you petrol at the end of the day, but it's very expensive. That's why only very serious-minded people go into producing gasoline using the modular refinery route. But as we speak, people are focused on doing refinery or building refineries. The question is, how quickly can the ones planned by Ezekiel in Bayelsa? I think Ezekiel's is planned to be 100,000 barrels. That's a huge investment. How quickly can they raise the funds and then push, get the project to start operations? But 3 or rather 4 are currently in operations as we speak, but they don't really produce petrol. They all produce diesel and the heavy byproducts of crude oil.
Okay, Odio, thanks for that information. Again, we'll come back to explore the other aspects. Earlier, we introduced Captain Waredi Eniswo, who was with us via Zoom. If he's still there, all right, yeah, well, he's there. Captain Waredi, I would like you to weigh in here. We're looking especially at refineries. We're not talking about some of these bullfire or the crude and environmentally debilitating procedures that persons use illegally. Well, Nigeria has 4 refineries, 2 of them in the Port Harcourt area, 1 in Warri, and then the other in Kaduna. From your knowledge of the industry, just what is the challenge with getting these refineries to work?
Okay, thank you very much. I think, when the refineries were built initially, nobody anticipated the problems we're going to face today. Now, what are the problems? Now, a refinery process, as far as I can understand, is a continuous process. If you somehow, somewhere break the process, to reset the whole process can be very, very expensive. Now, as you would have realized, in an environment where pipelines are being breached by criminals and vandals, it is very, very difficult to operate seamlessly in that kind of place. So that is a very, very big problem. However, sanity is within the situation, and or let me say sanity is coming. But on the other hand, when we started this pipeline protection project, we went into the communities and did a bit of a liaison work, a research work, and whatever. We discovered that a 1 liter bottle of the coal fire fuel they used to get was being sold at about 100 or 200 naira or something thereabout, which they use for domestic use here and there. But in the height of stopping all these projects, all these illegal refineries from carrying out their acts,
1 liter rose to about 800 naira, and that was really, really a big leap. It was not small for the people at all. So, riding on what the previous people have said, definitely at some point, we really have to think about making the refineries to work. But we keep comparing what is happening outside to what is happening inside of Nigeria. Now, it is very, very difficult for government to be holding on to things like refineries. If you investigate most of the successful refineries around the world, they operated based on private sector. And I think the government is moving in the right direction by supporting people like Dangote to go into these things. Because the bureaucracy in government is too difficult to be able to handle projects as big as refineries, projects with such very, very high level, high tech requirements for maintenance and so much and so forth. You go into approval processes, CEOs are limited in the amount of money they can spend or approve. It has to go somewhere else. And before you know all of that, I mean, the business would have collapsed. So I think there will be a private sector or private or public-private partnership process or partnership that will be able to come in between and solve most of these problems. Mind you, in order to solve this, it's not just going to be the private sector and government coming in. You also have to make sure that the stealing of Nigeria's oil should stop. Because if it does not stop, even if the private sector comes in and somebody breaches the source of the crude to be refined, is going to be a very, very big problem. And the private sector will just be discouraged and they will abandon the project, just like it became a bit of a pain for the government also to continue. So just the private sector alone is not enough to solve the problem. So that's my take on it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's come back to the studio. Yabagi, the unions in the oil sector are technically against privatization, you know, bringing the private sector into the refineries and all that. But government itself cannot run it alone. It's quite expensive. But we've heard of partners like Shell and Chevron and having refineries outside the country where we take our oil to, they refine this oil and sell it, bring it back to Nigeria. What about the other end products from the oil? What happens to it? Have we really bothered to ask ourselves that question?
Yeah, well, that's why a lot of people believe that where we have comparative advantage in terms of trade with other countries, we end up empowering other people's economies by giving them more jobs, for them to be able to employ their people. And then here we starve, our own people. We have graduates, and refineries employ not just unskilled labor. A huge number of skilled laborers are always employed. So it's supposed to be an opportunity for this country, really, to be what we're supposed to be, a great nation. But unfortunately, this is what is happening. That's why Pengasam, if I listen to what they were saying, that we need to copy what we are doing with LNG, where private sector are allowed to run the enterprise, and they pay dividends, to the country and employ Nigerians and things like that. I think that's what we must do. That's what the last speaker was talking about. That privatization is the way to go. And we have a good example in Dangote. I know that definitely because it's a private setup, it will be efficient. But don't lose the side of the dilemma which the government is in. The dilemma is that oil is a political product, and you know that if you don't manage it well, it can create political problems for the social problems for the government by way of economic pressure that will come.
Example, Venezuela
and other countries. Yes. So this is why all along I think government has been trying to find a way by which they will have control over the price that the nationals are supposed to pay for this product. But because of the corruption, it has not worked. So they must develop other models whereby the downstream should be 100%, privatized, and then you bring in some dampers in form of some economic intervention, programs that will assuage, the pains that the nationals will suffer, and you won't have the labor union fighting you or something like that. I remember in the 80s when the military administration was trying to tackle the issue of subsidy removal. I was one of those that gave them advice on a two-tier system. If you remember, there was a time when we were selling petrol from two different petrol stations. If you are private, you go to one. If you are commercial, so it was my idea. It worked. It was to douse the tension to ensure that the productive sector, which at that point in time and now is the transporters and things like that, they perform productive services, for the economy. So, issue of refineries, issue of subsidy, it's more of dealing with the mafia that are in that in that sector. Cabals, exactly, cabals. And they are official people. It's not somebody from outside like the oil and gas sector, NNPC or whatever. These cabals are people that you are paying salaries, giving them fantastic allowances and whatever. But they completely ignore and throw away their responsibilities to work for the country. They work for themselves, and this is the truth about it. So the issue now is government must find another formula. Allow privatization. Not in NNPCL, I'm talking about that kind of privatization, that nothing has changed. That they tell you it's a different place, and what you see, the more you see is the more this thing remains the same. So I'm not talking about NNPCL kind of privatization. I'm talking about real privatization, that the refineries will now have new boards, new GMDs and new whatever you want to have as personnel of these entities. And again, suggestions have been made before to the government that why don't you make it, a kind of sweet and sour policy when you sell your crude oil to Shell, like you said, ExxonMobil and whatever who come to buy our crude oil. Like you rightly said, they are experts in the refinery, in the refining of these products. Why don't you say, okay, we are selling to you 1 million barrels of crude oil, but I want 30% of, or even 20% to be refined locally by you. And I'm not saying you should sell it to me after you refine. Take it to international, market, sell it to whoever you want to sell it to. If you are selling to me, let me also pay the market price. But then what have you done? You will now force these organizations that are experts to now begin to look at how they can make your refining capacity also to become, efficient. So, and other countries are doing it, in policy where they know they have comparative advantage. They bring in policies that will make you to look inwards, how they can grow their own economy, not only taking our crude oil. We don't, believe me, what you don't even know is this. We don't even know who people buying our crude oil. Which is the most irresponsible policy you can ever find anywhere in the world. Saudi Arabia here, they sell their crude oil on CIF. They make sure you pay the cost of the crude, insurance, transportation, everything to Saudi Arabia. So the crude, they know where it is going. And they know what they call ultimate consignee, who is using my crude oil, who is ultimately using this crude oil. So that maybe bilateral agreements can come. I know I'm running your economy to a very large extent because you get your raw material from me. So give me something also in return. That is absent in our client here.
So, thanks. Let me bring this in. Some years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, on Good Morning Nigeria, we also had a conversation around the operations of our refineries. One of our guests, I've been struggling to recall his name. His name escapes me now. He joined us, I think, from Lagos for that conversation. And the interesting point about this was that he was a former refinery manager at Warri. His title was manager refinery, and he was the boss. That was the highest position. But you will recall I think it must have been in the 80s or early 90s, when the refineries were then converted into some pseudo limited liability companies, made into separate entities with their own boards, with their own chief executives, and so on and so forth. Did this then create governance issues that we are still grappling with? A gentleman, Warri Refinery at the time he was there was peak performance. His title, if you went to his office, nameplate would just be there, manager refinery, biggest shot in the place. Today, if you call somebody manager, I'm sure it will be 10 steps lower than that of the CEO, not coming anywhere near where the boards are. Now, this is part of the inheritance that NNPCL has today. Are we going to have to continue with this, or we say, look, let's just, like, I mean, if a heart is already clogged, just do a bypass and forget all of this.
The truth of the matter is the NNPC business model has really not worked, right? NNPC, prior to being called a limited entity, ran the upstream, midstream, downstream. At some point in the 90s, the downstream was privatized, so you had local players now come in. So that created a lot more efficiency. But the midstream and the upstream was still kept with NNPC, and it was managed centrally, and that has not worked. So you had issues at the refinery. Somebody needs a bit of mechanical work. He has to come to Abuja to get approval to make that part work. And there's something that the gentleman on Zoom said. The refinery process is a continuous flow process. You break one piece, you have to restart everything again. So you had a refinery, first of all, the pipelines would be sabotaged or some components in the refinery break down. Very interesting. In 2000, Gaius Obaseki was the GMD of NNPC. He gave an interview in The Guardian, and he said that the refineries were at 75% operational, operational. That what he needed to get it to 100% was the FCC, that's the fluid catalytic cracker unit. And by 2001, he expects that piece of equipment to be in place. And then we went on this, the government then had a change of mind, let's privatize the refineries, and then that pretty much killed the refineries. But in 2015, 2016, that same piece of equipment was still being said that they will still bring it in. Then Emeka Ofor, who was the turnaround, who was his company was doing the supposed maintenance, said the FCCU was expected, and Port Harcourt refinery will get to 75%. This was 2015, and then 2020 everything shut down. The point is the NNPC model has not worked because NNPC gets money from the crude oil sales, and as a business cannot account for the midstream losses it is suffering from the refineries. The refineries are a loss-making business, but you would not know because NNPC's revenue from the upstream supports that whole loss process. If you were to split NNPC, remove the refinery completely, entirely from the NNPC structure, you would start to see progress because whoever will own it will make sure it works or supposedly work. But because NNPC's business model, they run a balance sheet that covers everything, or a good balance sheet, you will think NNPC is profitable, meanwhile the refineries are dying. Now, there's another aspect of the refinery business that we're not looking at, and the gentleman has mentioned it, corruption. But we're looking at it internally. You see, Nigeria imports close to $30 to $50 billion worth of products. Petrol, petrol, diesel, jet fuel, kerosene, LPFO, right? We import these products. Forget about the refineries manufacturing. There are people in Switzerland, young boys, sitting in Swiss offices that have become billionaires by trading Nigerian products, trading Nigerian cargoes. There are people who have become billionaires by chartering ships, brokering ships that will move our crude to the refineries and then broker ships that will bring in the products. There are people who have made money just by doing the insurance on those things. Now, those people, it is not in their best interest for government-owned refineries to work because the NNPC still controls the industry. So they can afford to give somebody a $10 million bribe to make sure the refineries don't work. It's easy because their profits are in billions. I mean, just the margin alone on a cargo of petrol is huge, right? At some point in time in this country, people used to pay $1 million to whoever sat in PPMC to give them products, to give them allocation. $1 No jokes. They used to pay $1 million. So it became a very, when you stop that process,
makes a child to laugh.
Yes.
It's what will make the child to cry.
So
we're looking at internal sabotage here.
Internal and external sabotage. But the point is, this sabotage is allowed because of the model of the NNPC. NNPC controls both the midstream and upstream, right? The 442,000 barrels is what is making the refinery, my perspective, not to work now, because NNPC has to trade those cargoes and then bring in cargoes, and people are turning that around that. So if you still have that allocated to refine, people will always try and round trip. So remove the refinery business off NNPC, or better still, just kill the business. For instance, Kaduna Refinery, so long as you have pipelines connecting Kaduna from Niger Delta to Kaduna, you will always have breaches on those pipelines. You would always have breaches. So Kaduna Refinery will never work, right? The Port Harcourt Refinery, luckily, is close to, you can move products by ship. Warri is connected to some pipelines. Luckily, you can still move by ship. Dangote did the smartest thing. He has his products will be brought in by ships. It's not connected to any oil field.
You know, Odio, thanks. Let me just throw this in. During the military regime in this country, one of the decrees that was passed prescribed capital punishment, which is death by firing squad, for anyone who breached oil pipelines. And Nigerian intelligentsia, they're draconian, until breaches of pipelines, of crude, of refined or otherwise, became an industry. I'm not saying tie people to the stakes and just shoot them, but there was an indication that this would amount to economic sabotage from which the country would bleed. When we keep importing, the scenario you just described, Odio, this is where our forex is going. We are a rich country, but we are also a poor people. When we say President Muhammadu Buhari said he would take out 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. Today, people will say, no, there are now 133 million dimensionally poor. These are some of the contributing factors, many would argue, to what we are doing. So, if there are saboteurs of your economy that are holding you by the jugular, one of the indices of nationhood is your capacity to respond to those persons and deter them. I believe so, gentlemen.
Well, I agree with you to an extent, but guess what? If your business model continues to encourage that, you will kill the next man. Think about it. We used to tie people to Bar Beach and shoot them for armed robbery. It never stopped armed robbery, because there was an incentive for people to steal. The point is, your business model, the business model NNPC currently runs, to my mind, enables the next man who gets into that position to sabotage the system for his own vested interest. The system allows somebody in Geneva who realizes that he makes a lot of margin trading Nigerian cargoes to infiltrate the system. I'm not talking of countries coming to infiltrate us. I'm talking of individuals agents coming to say, look, just penetrating certain people and saying, look, don't make this work, and here's your money. And it doesn't work, right? And beyond that, the Niger Delta militancy has made that capital punishment a bit now hard, because it's now part of the, how do you put it now, part of the restiveness, where people, agitations, and the next thing you know, they go breach a pipeline. Right, so it will be hard. You pretty much just kill almost everybody in the Niger Delta if you take capital punishment. But my point is this: NNPC, the business model of NNPC needs to change. Either NNPC needs to hive off its entire midstream operations and focus solely on upstream, or it shuts down that whole business and allows the private sector to take charge. But I'm also concerned if a private sector investor was to take over Warri Refinery, right? That investor would have to invest in ships bringing in crude, because bringing those products by pipelines will never work. There would always be breaches, continuous breaches.
No, but Ojon, thanks. I'm just saying, we're going to captain Waredi. We know that this is part of your area. Look, let's remind ourselves. The mafia in the U.S. was a menace to everyone, to the system, and so on and so forth. Everybody knows about Al Capone, you know about Charlie Lucky. Yeah. You also know, of course, about the five families in New York. Now, it took a Columbia professor of law to help draft what is called RICO. RICO is Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. 10 years later, the authorities reached out to that RICO and they began to take out all the big bosses. And we all saw what happened. That led to the depreciation of the value, decimation of the ranks with hundreds of years of jail terms that they all suffered. So today in New York, well, of course, you still have the mafia, you still have them, but they are not as strong as they were. So if a society is challenged, I think that the right thing is for us to say, hey, listen, this is our jugular, how do we survive? Captain Waredi.
Thank you very much once again. Just before I comment on that, I would also like to ride on the last addition. Part of also the problem we have always had is that the subsidy regime did not help the country at all. So a lot of people money from the subsidy, and those people will continue to make sure that the refineries don't work so that they can continue to benefit from the fraud coming out of the subsidy environment. One of the things you would know and agree is that while what you suggested and what that professor wrote worked, it worked because there are people with a common dream. But in our own case, what is our common dream? We don't have a common dream. We only have individual dreams. So because of the individual dreams, we have a very weak, and I repeat, a very, very weak enforcement system. If not, there are things in place to make things work to some extent. But because of the weak enforcement regime we have, every angle seems to be filled up with compromise. You know, people keep thinking of, oh, how am I going to take care of myself in case anything, or in case of that, or in case of this. So it is very difficult. And not until we deal with our weak enforcement regime system, you could write a manual of 1,000 pages. Nobody is going to. You know, what we understand most here is the use of force. And if that force is also not strong enough, it is going to be very difficult. And we need to really look at that seriously. You know, as a private security firm, we are not a law enforcement agency. So when these things come up, definitely the law enforcement agents would also have to key into the dream of the country to make sure that, yes, this is where we are going to go. Anybody who goes outside of this rule is going to face the brunt of the law and this and that. So I think those are part of the things we have to follow. But it's not going to be an easy battle because we're only looking at it internally. We're not looking at the external influence with similar interest. The external influence of sabotaging Nigeria is far higher, far higher than what is happening internally. You have refineries outside, as said, you know, that are making billions of dollars from Nigeria's neglect. You think they're going to just allow you? No. You suggested that the IOC is a big part of it. You know how much jobs they have created in their own countries, you know, by virtue of the fact that ours don't work? No. So all these are challenges. And you have our neighboring countries also who are heavily dependent on the cheap, illegal, and illegally refined fuel coming from Nigeria. So there is a lot of diplomacy to do outside, you know, a lot of trading to do outside, a lot of threats also that, look, if you do not, or if you somehow somewhere caught as a country sabotaging Nigeria, we're not even going to send you anything. I think there must be some policies, external and foreign policies like that are going to help us buoy our vision for our country also. So that's my contribution on this for now.
Yabaji, this is a conversation that keeps coming up every time a new administration comes in. That is the high point of discussion. We're going to work on the refineries. We're going to work on the refineries. This incoming administration already has a lot on its plate. Removing the oil subsidy and, working on the moribund refineries we have in this country. Where do they begin from, actually? Where do they start from to get it right?
Drastic situations, need drastic action. You must tackle the issue of what we have, the hub of corruption, which is what you call NNPC today. And either you get rid of that organization and then bring in, because a foul soup, whether you add salt, you add pepper, you add whatever, it will remain foul. There's nothing you can do about it, believe me. So we must take very serious approach to solving, like Kinsley was saying, of the mafia group in New York. In fact, he said it before me. I was going to mention it. Actually, it's one of the things I want to mention. That Nigeria's oil and gas sector is a mafia group, and the coming government. I'm happy that I hope that this administration, the president-elect, gets to be in power, because this country requires somebody rugged. With the knowledge, the kind of knowledge that it's coming from, because it's coming from the private sector, and I know that it's the kind of person, I hope people that will come around him will also be those that have this country at heart. Because as a president, he has no choice but to work for these people of this country. But what remains now is people that are going to work, directly with him, whether they will internalize, the issue of working for Nigeria to get us out of this unnecessary rut that we are in. It's not, Nigeria does not deserve this. We have no business to everything we are suffering from. Because like the gentleman here was saying about people sitting in, in Switzerland or whatever. That's what I said. Saudi Arabia has cut out all these things. What they do? I said CIF. Costs of the product, you pay it there. Insurance, you pay it in Saudi Arabia. Freight, you pay it in Saudi Arabia to the Saudi Arabian, nationals or
so the money remains in the system.
In the system, you have, here is A4B, free on board. Bring your vessel. Where you take our crude oil to is anyone's guess. That is the most irresponsible way of running a sector that is your comparative advantage. You just leave it to its own fate. Whatever happens, that's what it is. I told you about my work with Naiti. Out of that work, 2 gazettes came out. It was Aganga, who was the Minister of Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment at that time. Aganga told me he went to a meeting in New York, and at that meeting, the CEO, the Shell International, attended that meeting. And when the CEO of Shell International stood up to speak, the very first thing he mentioned, Nigeria has introduced something that they are trying to understand what it's all about.
Yeah. And
when we came for a meeting here, the IOC's CEO say over their dead body, this thing will never work, and it never, well, under what do you call it, Jonathan, we are fighting them to get it to work, and it started working. But unfortunately for us, when Buhari came on board, he appointed one of them that we are fighting, which is Kachiku, who was then the vice president, ExxonMobil, to be his GMD. So that was the end of the story. So Nigeria is a captured, is a captured system. The industry is captured, and a president must take drastic action to get it out for Nigeria.
Engineer Yabagi Yusuf Sani, thank you very much. This will be an ongoing conversation. The key thing, of course, is the national interest. We can build, as it were, now castles in the air and say how we're going to create jobs, In the meantime, the balloon that will take us to that level is pricked at all points by issues such as you guys have raised this morning, Audio and Morphoma, and particularly the external dimension to all of this. What does a nation that is challenged by this kind of racket that has international affiliations, how does a nation respond to that? And of course, you cannot be a nation, so-called, if you cannot respond to issues of this. How many years did it take to build the Kaduna refinery?
Yeah, exactly. Well, gentlemen, we thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria this morning. Engineer Baji Yusuf, an energy expert, thank you so much as usual. Audio on Morphoma. energy expert and CEO, New Hampshire Group. Thank you so much for your contribution. And our guest via Zoom from Warri Delta State, Captain Waride Enisho, Executive Director, Operations, Tantita Security Services Nigeria Limited. We appreciate your contribution to the conversation. We'll take a break. When we return, our second conversation will begin. Do stay.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our second conversation this morning is on the National Aviation Conference organized by the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. And with us in the studios to discuss this, it's our pleasure to welcome NAS, Mark Abraham Inajo. He is General Manager, Safety Services of FAN, and also the alternate chairman of the Conference Planning Committee. Mark Abraham Inajo, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you.
All right. So why this conference again?
Well, why again? We're building on what we did last year. After we held the maiden edition last year, we discovered that there was really a need for us to keep talking so that we could understand one another better and engage one another better as stakeholders. And based on some of the issues that were raised, we realized that the discussion needed to continue. And the industry was yearning for such a platform, for such interaction. So we're building on what we did last year.
Yes, and while I was going to my research, trying to get a grip on the conversation this morning, I read something from somebody who is part of the aviation sector around the world, and that's Mark Abraham, and he said, we really look forward to going to Abuja in 2023. It will be a great opportunity to highlight the opportunities for the aviation community in West Africa, and we know already that many local and international companies are ready to join us. So what's it going to be like?
Okay, like the person rightly noted, there are tremendous opportunities in the aviation industry in Nigeria. We're only scratching the surface. Airports are not just meant to ferry people from one place to the other or process that movement. But there are investment opportunities within the airports, and then we also hope to showcase the investment opportunities within the communities where these airports are located. For instance, I was in Bauchi sometime last year. The last time I was in Bauchi, I was 16 years old, an undergraduate, and we were part of a tourist club, students of University of Jos. And we went there, and I proceeded to Bauchi, and I said, this place is still existing, but it is so quiet. Why is nobody talking about it? This should be a tourist destination. The airport there should be busier than it is. So these are some of the things we're hoping to showcase. So we're engaging with the state governments to also come tell us what people can benefit from investing in their states.
What is the theme for this year's conference, and where and when is it taking place?
Okay, the theme is we're looking at the sustainability of the aviation industry in Nigeria, and rightly so, because the industry has been bedeviled by a number of challenges internationally, and we typically say it's one aviation. So what happens to the aviation industry in one part of the world will impact on others. Of course, we do have our peculiarities, which we're also going to be looking at. So we want to look at the sustainability of the industry from the perspectives of different players, the operators' perspective, the regulators' perspective, even from an economic perspective. So we're going to look at all this. And then we're also looking at the impact of brain drain on the industry, because it costs a lot to train an aviator, because a lot of our training is denominated in hard currency. And you know what has been happening to that in this country. And then we train these young men and women, and after a while they tell you they're leaving the country because they're giving offers in other parts of the world. So it's one of the areas we want to look at. How do we make our young aviators stay back and grow this industry?
So what will it offer stakeholders?
Well, first, a platform for self-expression, and we need to know where they should pinch them so that we can profile solutions, and then we need to know what the other person needs to do to facilitate your own operations so that we have a more efficient system. And the discussions start today and will run all the way to the 18th at the International Conference Center in Abuja.
All right, so we're just seeing that on the screen now. Yeah. That's the FAN National Aviation Conference. This is all in country, or are you expecting participants from outside the country?
A handful of them. For instance, we have the Airports Council International President for Africa, Mr. Emmanuel Chavez is already in the country. He'll be giving the keynote address. He was here last year. And then we have a group from Lithuania. They are making a presentation on the investment opportunities in their country and what they can do with Nigeria. So those basically are the two foreign people or bodies who are participating with us.
You talked about challenges bedeviling the aviation industry, and one thing that I really want us to talk about this morning is the challenges including flight delays, poor customer relations. Will the conference address these issues?
Yes, it would, because we also have the, I think, Consumer Complaints Commission participating. The NCA is empowered by law to deal with customer complaints in the industry. A lot of people don't know this. Your flight is delayed. You don't attack the staff of the airlines, for instance. You make your report to the regulators, and then they would interact with the airlines and find out what could have caused the delay. Now, talking about flight delay, so many things could cause a delay. For instance, before a flight takes off, there's catering service, there's fueling service and all that. These are things that are outsourced to other parties. So the airline could be ready to leave, but if the fueler is delayed, is held up somewhere, the flight cannot take off. So when you hear the announcer says, the announcer says something like, for operational reasons, this could be some of the reasons, So it's not all the time that the fault is from the airline. In fact, most of the time, the fault is not from the airline itself, but from other people who render services that will facilitate the flight. So the passengers need to know this.
What are we doing in terms of ensuring greater efficiency from each of these subcontractors that ultimately conjoin to make a flight happen?
Okay, I give a typical example with fueling. For instance, when the airport in Lagos was built, you could fuel an aircraft, because there were pipes that were buried and you could do that. Over time, they were not maintained, but now we have resuscitated some of them, and we are working towards eliminating the need for browsers to come to the airside to fuel this aircraft so that it will be more efficient.
Oh, that's an interesting development, because I recall some years ago there were flight cancellations and delays on account of fuel supplies, and some persons said, look, you needed to pay cash before we could supply you. The issue of the ruptured pipelines also came up. I think it's from somewhere around Monsimi or so that they get their supplies. Well, is that becoming a bygone issue? Because we also understand, this probably is not within your remit, but we also understand that all our Jet A1 needs are imported these days, whereas in the past that wasn't the case. So,
well, that's a national problem. As a country, we import our fuel right now. The refineries are not working, and the aviation industry is not insulated from that challenge. So it's a desire we all have, and we hope the incoming administration will focus on that, to resuscitate our refineries so that access to fueling will be much more efficient and available. So the airlines have to source their fuel almost the same way you go to source your own fuel for your vehicles. So they get fuel suppliers. The price is not fixed because you need to fly, so you have to negotiate with them at the prices they're offering, and that's a whole lot of challenge that they have to contend with. And of course, it's pushed up the cost of the tickets too.
Let's talk about your relationship with the labor union in the aviation industry. We've had a lot of crisis happening. Just last week, I believe they said they were to go on strike, and it affects the livelihoods of millions of Nigerians who use that mode of transportation to travel to other parts of the country and the world. And at times, if I'm flying and I don't get a notice that my flight has been delayed, or the flight is not going to the place I want to, you lose money. What happens to people who lose opportunities, who lose money and still complain, but the complaint doesn't get to the right authority that it can be addressed?
Okay, like I said earlier, the complaints need to be channeled to the right place through the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, and then perhaps work with the Consumer Protection Council to address their needs. But talking about our relationship with the unions, the unions have a platform in this conference. They would also speak to the stakeholders, sustainability of the aviation industry, Nigerian workers' perspective. We want to hear what the issues are. We know some of them, but we also believe that dialogue is the best way of resolving these issues. Yes, the current administration, and talking about my management now under Captain Rabi Odidu, has done a lot to engage with the unions, and a lot of issues have been solved. A lot of crises have been averted. It's an ongoing discussion. The worker issues, you cannot totally solve them because it's an evolving economy.
It has been consistent now.
In recent times, but some of them are being worked on. For instance, some of them are not within the purview of the aviation industry to resolve. For instance, the issues about wages. Our recommendations are with the Wages Commission. The Honorable Minister has said that he's engaged with them, the Permanent Secretary is working with them, so that this can be approved and then it can be implemented in-house. And this has been communicated to the workers.
Well, tell us something. What is the mandate of FAAM, Federal Airports Aviation Authority? What do you do?
Well, if I were to capture that in our mission statement, it is to profitably develop and manage customer-centric airport facilities. Our business is to give you an airport where airlines can come fly and other people can come do their businesses. So strictly speaking, it's like an owner of a motor park. All kinds of transport companies can come operate from that motor park. Okay, so we provide that facility, and our most important asset is the runway, because you need a runway to land and take off. And then we manage every other thing, provide security so that your aircraft are safe, your luggage is safe and all that. These are ancillary services, but the focus really is providing the runway on the air side and ensuring that planes can take off and land safely in any airport in Nigeria.
I asked this question advisedly, Jumai. Who owns the airport? And therefore, who owns the runway and the ancillary services for the runway? Why is it that some airports, the runways have remained the way they are? No extension, no addition, and sometimes to get an addition, it's almost like you are building an international airport. Whose responsibility is that?
And a second question before, so that you can just join us, we're running out of time. Will the airport concession be part of the conversation?
Okay, let me start with Kingsley's question. There are two people, basically, or two bodies, the federal government and the state governments. We have state-owned airports like Bauchi State and all that. Many state governments are thinking about building airports right now, and some are being built. Even the Lagos State government is building an airport. So that airport will belong to the Lagos State government. The federal government manages about 22 airports right now. And some of the state governments, having built their airports and realized that there are challenges with managing them, are handing them over to the federal government. So talking about the ownership, those that are built or handed over to federal government belong to the federal government. And the federal government provides for them. And you'll notice that there's been some development in terms of terminal enhancement, some of baggage processing facilities, we're replacing them. But Kingsley, when you talk about expanding the airport, that has to be based on a lot of studies, aeronautical studies. And then, of course, the flights going there, the growth. You don't just develop a new terminal because you want to increase the capacity of an airport. It has to be sustainable. It has to pay for itself. So we're gradually moving towards commercialization. And we're moving from an era where the government has a tight grip on the airports to bringing in private sector involvement. So we're working and partnering with people to help develop some of these facilities, because obviously the federal government doesn't have all the resources to develop the airports as it should be developed. And that comes to the issue of concession. The whole idea of concession is to bring in private participation, which in itself is a good idea. And what we're working on is to ensure that we dot the I's and cross the T's so that it meets the aspirations of all stakeholders in the industry.
Well, Juma, I know we're going to sign them off now. If I were to be at your conference, one of the issues I will raise will pertain to baggage handling. How much time does it take for my flight to land and the airplane parks, and then I get my luggage? Sometimes you have a 50-minute flight, Lagos-Abuja, for instance, or Abuja-Lagos, and you spend another 70 minutes, not less than 45, 50 minutes waiting for your luggage to come out. And you see maybe only a few hands that are pushing the truck to go to the cargo hold. What is the meaning of this?
Okay, we have ground handlers, okay, talking about NACO, SACO, these are people whose business it is. Like I said, our business is to give you the runway and the facilities. But ground handling is not our business. But what we do, because you are our customers, we engage with them and say, please, can you make it easier for our customers? Can you reduce your processing time? if you need to employ more persons, if, for instance, the baggage processing equipment is the problem, FAN has been replacing those with modern facilities. Okay, so, and that's why, again, the conference is important. This issue would be discussed because the ground handlers are going to be part of the conference, and we'll talk about this.
And then maybe they will understand that they don't need to throw out things carelessly if some things break in your box before you finally get it. Okay, Nath Mark Abraham Inajo, alternate chairman, FAN National Aviation Conference Planning Committee, and also the General Manager, Safety Services, Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best at the conference.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Kingsley.
Thank you. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Thank you so much for watching. Join us again tomorrow for another edition. I am Chumwe Yusuf.
Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Sadalo.